Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Home Video Library. I'm your host Nathan P. Butler, author of A Saga on Home Video, the 3-volume second edition of which can be found on Amazon right now in hardback, paperback, and Kindle formats. Also, by the way, just as a quick note, if you have not seen the videos yet, check out the February 2022 project update or a special separate video about book plates to find out how you can get signed book plates within the US at least right now for your copies of A Saga on Home Video second or first edition. That information went up within about the last month or so. Now, this video you're watching right now, this is the second in a series of Q&A videos, sort of a new side series from the Star Wars Home Video Library, where we're going to take questions that viewers have asked and community members have asked and answer them here on the show, sort of giving more longevity to the series as there just aren't a lot of new releases being put out right now. As a side note, for those who are collectors, keep an eye out. We are seeing broader announcements now, or not announcements, but listings at least, of those new trilogy sets coming later in 2022. France was the first to show a DVD trilogy set for each trilogy, a Blu-ray trilogy set for each trilogy, and a 4K/Blu-ray trilogy set for each trilogy on Amazon France, I guess it was. We've now seen those show up for Germany, but I believe it's only the Blu-ray and DVD sets, no 4K set. And then similarly, DVD and Blu-ray only sets showing up for the UK now as well, but no 4K set listed for either the UK or Germany, and we are told they're not coming to the United States. So if you are a collector, there are some new things finally showing up. I'm actually not sure how I'm going to handle it. I may wind up doing Blu-ray and DVD from the UK and then maybe get the 4K one from France just to be able to show all three, and how there was that weird situation where the 4K one wasn't available in the UK. Haven't quite decided yet. Need to take care of our taxes before I put in any orders for that kind of stuff. But just as a side note there, yes, there is some new stuff coming, but typically there's not a lot. Hence, episodes like these that sort of keep the show going with some home video topic without necessarily having to dive into the weeds of the really obscure stuff all the time, the barely Star Wars stuff like Thumb Wars all the time, yet still interesting, hopefully, to the ongoing audience for the show. So, that said, what we were looking at this time, again, is questions that are asked by viewers or members of the community. There were not really questions posted underneath the last Q&A video, the first of these, so I again turned to the Star Wars Home Video Facebook group to ask for questions, and they actually came up with some pretty cool ones this time, so we're going to take a look at what those said. We're actually going to start with the newest one and work our way backwards, because it was the first question that was asked that really had me kind of sitting back, scratching my head, stroking my chin, to come up with an answer here. So we start with the newest of the questions that was asked. This comes from Father Matthew Hardesty. He asks, can you list the special features that are exclusive to VHS? For example, I just read in Chapter 5 of the Book of Nathan Butler. So we have ButlerCon now for when I just hand off extras from my collection. And now A Saga on Home Video is the Book of Nathan Butler. Add those to the verb butlered, which is apparently when you see something home video-wise on From the Star Wars Home Video Library, then feel the compulsion to get it for yourself. I'm apparently building a bit of a lexicon within the Star Wars Home Video community without really trying to do that. So, okay, fine. The Book of Nathan Butler. I'll give it to you this once. But he said he just read in Chapter 5 that the US widescreen VHS of The Phantom Menace has an exclusive feature called Filmmaking has Turned a Corner, which of course it does. So, I can really only think of 3 things that we would consider exclusive VHS bonus features, at least in my mind, at least that I can recall. And I'm thinking specifically of the US market here. So, you figure A New Hope, Empire, and Jedi. From the initial release of A New Hope in 82 all the way up through 92, not really any bonus features to speak of, and in general, when you see a trailer show up, the trailer will appear somewhere else. And I wouldn't consider a trailer a bonus feature. If you want to consider a trailer a bonus feature, then, I guess, because the VHSs were advertising themselves, and there was a point at which Empire had a trailer for the home video release of A New Hope, I guess those sort of could be considered exclusive bonus features, but even then, I would assume that in the earlier era of that, the beta releases probably had those on them as well. I don't have a beta player to check. So I would say the first time we see really true bonus features is 95, but those weren't VHS exclusive. It was that Leonard Maltin interview, and those were on Laserdisc as well, so those wouldn't count. And I guess 97, you could sort of count the stuff there because those were those featurettes on like what makes the special editions so special. The thing about those though is that whereas you have your like your regular like one for each film, one's on the regular releases, and then you have that combined version removed from the regular cassettes for that special widescreen, boxed set, the big limited edition thing with the paperweight and everything. Those are sort of exclusive, I guess, because the version on Laserdisc isn't exactly the same, but they're in the same vein and kind of meant to sort of fill that same role. So I don't know if you would count those as exclusive or not. I probably wouldn't, but if you're talking about like this exact cut of something, I guess technically it would be. Again, kind of like the trailers, sort of, but not really a bonus feature per se. This is closer at least. Because it is a bonus feature, but it's not a bonus feature meant to be just on that one format because there are those versions on Laserdisc as well. So I'd say probably the ones that stand out as the actual exclusive bonus features that really stand out in my mind, there'd be three. You'd have the one that he mentioned there, the 2000 VHS release of Phantom Menace in widescreen that has the filmmakers turned a corner on the end of it. And then that same year in 2000, A New Hope, whether you got it in the box set or by itself, has that special little featurette about episode 2 where it shows the return to the Lars Moisture Farm and how Owen and Beru are coming back in Attack of the Clones and everything. And then on the Attack of the Clones VHS, the last of the American VHS releases for a Star Wars film, and I am focusing on films here, of course. In that case, it's sort of some exclusive, some not. There's that Star Wars Connections thing about like how the two trilogies connect into a broader story of the Skywalkers, even though they haven't gotten to Revenge of the Sith yet. But the other bonus features were deleted scenes, and those actually appear on the DVD. So it's just that Star Wars Connections thing. And then, of course, after that, you don't have any more VHS releases in the U.S. And you would imagine that probably if there had been Laserdisc releases in the U.S. of Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones, they probably would have included some of that stuff too. It's just that the format had effectively died in the U.S. for us after 97 for Star Wars releases. So, yeah, I mean, as far as I know, it's just those three, unless you really want to kind of get into the weeds on minor nuances and start counting some of that other stuff. But to me, those are the three. Then Alex Peacock asks, not sure how feasible it would be with the half-life of videotape, but do you think it would be possible to gather a collection of TV broadcast cuts/edits? Different countries, languages, same country, different networks, etc. So I would say, I mean, if anything is physically available, unless you count digital as collecting, in which case digital would work too, it could theoretically be collected, I guess. In this case, it would not be legitimate releases, of course. Someone would have to have just recorded it off of television and be providing that. And if they're not just giving it away, it's that gray area of, I'm not actually selling what's on this VHS cassette. I'm selling it as a blank. It just happens to have stuff on it that you can tape over. Golly, kind of thing. But I guess as long as at least one person recorded a broadcast for each individual broadcast and still has the tape somewhere or has digitized it, theoretically that could be possible, though I would imagine that would be even more difficult than like trying to collect all the Star Wars screeners that are out there, because you'd really have to kind of hunt for this sort of thing and hope for this sort of thing. I just don't see it as, I see it as something that, it's one of those things like, is it theoretically possible? Yes, it's theoretically possible. Realistically, is it feasible? Probably not, just because of how difficult that hunt would be, and just getting a list of all the different cuts that might be available, all the different airings that might be available would be a pain. And lest we not forget, when we're talking about TV airings, we're typically talking about with commercials as well, which goes back to the whole idea of, okay, if we're talking about commercials as well, commercials are going to be different in different markets. So does someone consider something a different cut or a different copy, I guess you could say, if it has different commercials in it? Because a lot of times, if you're talking about these, I mean, it depends on the station, but a lot of stations will have like, here's our block of commercials, here's the national commercials that go everywhere, but now here's where the local cable company or the local whatever company slides in their advertisements that are for local companies and stuff like that, their airtime. I think it would just be a massive nightmare to try to do, but I mean, in theory, it should be possible, especially if we're talking about digitized copies, because you don't have to worry about tape degradation, tape destruction. As soon as it's digitized once, it's available, in theory. Then Travis Cook asks, for a collector that does not have the A New Hope 1982 or 1983 drawer-style VHS in their collection yet, which release is a good one to look out for without breaking the bank? So there's two different ways I can interpret that question. One would be, if you don't have either, which one of those two to get. The other way is, if you don't have either, which other one should you get? I'm not entirely sure what's being asked there, but I'll answer both ways here. And as far as the breaking the bank thing goes, I'm going to answer kind of in a vacuum here, because what's happening right now with VHS prices is absolutely freaking ridiculous. All of a sudden, there's this massive push towards VHS releases, grading them and stuff like that, some manipulation of that grading market, and it's leading to some really just ridiculous sales prices for certain releases. Releases that, a year ago you could have gotten for like $50 going for thousands, or at least selling for thousands. Maybe nobody actually buys them and so on and so on. But the hype builds, and some big sort of whales, the people who spend a lot of money, say that in like the gaming parlance. The whales coming in to actually spend the money to purchase something with that kind of cost for the prestige of it and that sort of thing. So assuming we're in a normal market, where it's really based more on supply and demand for the specific items without the artificial inflation that has happened lately. Or if you sort of take the market change lately, and I've talked about this in detail before, I'm not going to go into the whole econ teacher stuff this time, but you think of it as two separate markets, one for sealed and graded versus one for everything else in a more normal sense. I would say that of the two to find, personally, I'd aim for 82. But that's just because, even though I think 83 a lot of times is harder to find, for 82, that's the first A New Hope full release on VHS. Now, granted, there was the home video library release earlier that year, but that I don't think counts. The video rental library, I guess it was called. Home video library is the show. But yeah, I mean, looking back on it, that wasn't officially meant to ever get into, buyers' hands. It was supposed to be a rental-only type of thing. So, if you want to be able to say, hey, look, it's the first official VHS release of all of A New Hope on home video, the 82 copy is the one to get. Now, if you're saying, if you don't have either of those, which other one to get? Video rental library, right? I think it's important for a collector oftentimes to be, unless they collect only modern formats, to be able to say, this is the first of something. This is a milestone. This is not just a cool release. This one means something in the history of Star Wars home video over time. And in that case, the one to get, again, if you don't have 82 or 83, would be to get the 82 video rental library version. If you're talking only retail, I would say the 84 release, the one that doesn't say digitally mastered, because then at least you can say this was the last that was missing C-3PO's line. It would be added back, and if you have a story to tell of why you have that release and what makes it kind of special relative to others, right? It was the last one before Ben Burtt went in and digitally remastered the soundtrack and all that kind of stuff so that 3PO's line returned. So here it is. It's the only slim case version that's missing the line and that kind of thing, at least for that era. So yeah, that's what I would go with personally. Then Matt Schott asks, why was there never a home video release of the Imax cut of Attack of the Clones? I saw it at Navy Pier in Chicago in November of 2002, and it was an awesome experience. Much better and tighter focused cut, in my opinion. I think you just kind of hit on it there, right? It was a much more focused and tight cut. For those who don't know, because of the limitations of IMAX in terms of runtime, the version of Attack of the Clones that was shown in IMAX was different than those elsewhere. But primarily it was different just in the sense of it cut stuff for time, as opposed to it being new additions or anything like that. And thinking back to how Lucas viewed the films, how he liked to tweak the films and things like that, I would say that probably the reason why the IMAX cut never hit home video, aside from the fact that usually IMAX cuts didn't hit home video, just in general, as kind of a general rule, I would say that the reason is that to Lucas's mind, the full cut, the full version of the film, is what he eventually put out on home video. Because remember, they even added stuff and tweaked stuff for the home video releases that weren't in theaters, right? So you got the film version, the digital version, the IMAX version. Now here's the home video version, and so on and so on. So I kind of feel like, to Lucas's mind, anything that was shorter was him compromising his vision for the format of IMAX. And certainly he wouldn't want a compromised version of his vision to be put out there when he could instead sort of tweak it and everything and give us a full version of his vision. As for why not since Lucas left Lucasfilm, I mean, one, I don't think there's just that much interest in that kind of release. Certainly, they don't tend to do it very often. Maybe we'll see something like that someday with, maybe Disney Plus or something, because they are doing some of the stuff with some of the Marvel films, I guess, where they're allowing like the IMAX aspect ratio to show up. I don't see it happening, but even if it did, even if it was something that was on someone's mind, I still think that when it comes to anything that would violate Lucas's vision, like putting out the unaltered version, say, of A New Hope in 4K or whatever, if they can, that sort of thing, unless we're talking like an anniversary thing to make it special, I would have, and this is a big anniversary this year for Attack of the Clones, and it means nothing. Basically, it's 20 years and it means nothing. They're not really celebrating much. I think that from the standpoint of putting anything out that violates Lucas's vision, you'd have to wait until those who are personally loyal to Lucas himself, regardless of whether he's there or not, to move on from the company. So no more Filoni, no more Kennedy, and so on and so on. So that it really is just a Lucas independent version of Lucasfilm working under Disney. And I don't see that happening for a while. And this one comes from Tanya Heinbaugh, if I'm saying your last name correctly here. Tanya actually is one of the members of the group who does a lot of pictures of items with unique background and lighting and whatnot. Looks very, if you ever see some very distinctive product images, that's probably where they're coming from. If you ever see boring ones that are basically just the product laid out against a white background, that's probably me, because I'm probably grabbing it from the pictures I took for the book. But she asks, what are some of the best places you found to get tapes/DVDs? Hard to find ones specifically. I'm going to have to disappoint here in that for me, it's typically one of two places. eBay or other collectors. That's pretty much it. I tend to go on eBay to hunt for stuff. If it's hard to find stuff, I'll set up a saved search for something to be able to hopefully catch something when it does pop up. Get those little email notifications. Like I'm set up right now with a whole bunch of different saved searches so that first thing in the morning when I wake up, in my email, there are saved searches sitting there waiting for me to do a quick click to see what has come up with new items under that name. So there's that. And then a lot of stuff I'm getting from other collectors. People who are just like, hey, I don't need this anymore. Hey, is anybody looking for this? Or the donations that come in, for instance, from people like Matt Fry, which was just crazy and awesome at the same time. But that obviously isn't like a reliable way of getting things. Just not normal, everyday acquisitions. I mean, there are other places. I mean, secondhand stores. Some people like to use secondhand stores and stuff like that, like Goodwill. And thrift stores. I typically don't usually go to those places because there aren't any right nearby that I care to go to. But those are an option. I would say probably the other big place for me would be like a flea market or a convention. Something where there's a specialized person who's there selling like that stuff. Particularly if it's a sci-fi or a themed convention that would lean towards Star Wars stuff. It's tricky for me because it's been so long since I've acquired certain things that are now considered particularly difficult things to get that I don't have a lot of places to point people. Mercari, places like that. Though I would say don't underestimate the power of networking with people from other regions. Every once in a while, you'll see something from your region that you want to get that you just can't get your hands on that is actually on, like, say, eBay UK. Even though it's from the US, perhaps. But that UK seller is only willing to ship within the UK. So you might find somebody who's from the UK who's willing to have it shipped to them and then ship it to you if you're covering the cost and everything. So, don't be afraid to network to try to get your hands on things, particularly if there's a chance that it's selling on another market. Because you'll find usually, not always, usually, if it's the older releases, if it's not something that's brand new, that's exclusive like a steelbook or something, if you find it being sold exclusively in a region that is not yours by exclusive, I just mean a seller who will only ship there, a lot of times the demand for it in that market will probably be less, so it's easier to get your hands on if it is high demand in your market. All right, guys, and here's the last one. This is the one that caused me to have to kind of sit back and think a little bit, and I've got kind of two answers for this one, I think. So Jeremy Goss asks, if you had to sell your collection and could only keep 5 items, what would they be? So as I said, I'm going to answer this a couple of different ways, and it kind of depends on point of view of which answer could be considered valid. If you're talking about individual specific items, then one thing needs to be, kind of taken into consideration, and that is the fact that if I were to sell off my entire massive Star Wars home video collection, then I probably wouldn't be thinking of it in terms of a collector's mindset, but as a viewer's mindset. Kind of like when I sold off my massive library of basically at least one copy of every Star Wars comic ever produced, at least one copy of every Star Wars novel ever produced, and so on and so on. I had this massive library. You can see it in the background in some of the earlier videos of this series before it was a home video background. Just to make space for home video, I sold off that massive collection except for a handful of things that I hung on to, like signed stuff and that sort of thing. But I found that in doing so, my mindset significantly shifted from being a collector to being simply a reader, a completist reader, but still just a reader of that stuff. Mostly digital at this point. Which basically means that, probably that same mindset would kick in for home video, and I'd be thinking about it as a viewer, not a collector, if I sold off the collection. So, I would think that I would want to have the Skywalker Saga box set, because I would, from the US, I guess, because I would want to have the 4K version of each film on disc. I want to have a Blu-ray copy of each film on disc, and I want to have the Blu-ray bonus features discs, because that's quite a bit of bonus features for each of the individual films there. If we were talking about individual items, then I would then have to also include a 4K/Blu-ray/Blu-ray bonus disc copy of Solo and Rogue One into that mix to have all the films. Probably the Zavi Steelbook version from 2020 of each, maybe. Or maybe it's a copy of Rogue One, maybe out of China, that might include the 3D disc. Maybe it's a Solo that also includes a 3D disc, like from Japan. But suffice to say, I'd want to have all the films in 4K Blu-ray and with their Blu-ray bonus discs, and that would mean that for sure, to be able to have all 11 films, that's a minimum of 3 slots out of the 5, right? Because Rogue One and Solo aren't in the Skywalker Saga boxed set. That leaves me with 2 spaces to work with. So one would be probably Sentimental Value, which is the Special Letterbox Collector's Edition VHS set from '92. It was one of the first 2 simultaneously purchased Star Wars home video items I ever had, alongside the full-screen version from '92, both of which I bought in '93 through an order through the Lucasfilm Company store, which in and of itself was also, I think, my first big mail order type thing of any kind. I was in middle school. I basically gave my mom the money. She ordered with her credit card. I had saved up for it. And then I kept pestering the Lucasfilm Company store constantly. When's it going to ship? When's it going to ship? When's it going to ship? By phone to their customer service, because I was an impatient kid and the internet wasn't a thing yet for tracking those orders. So that would probably stay from Sentimental Value. But that would also probably mean I would need to hang on to a VCR, a VHS player. We'll get to that in a second. And then probably the last thing, I guess, would probably be the Definitive Collection Laserdisc set, to be able to watch that great version of the original films, the original 3, on a Laserdisc player in what is generally considered the strongest release for those. Yeah, I guess that would be it, but that would take up 5 spaces, so that would be it. Now, if you let me treat things as sets, it's a little bit different of an answer. I think that you could replace the Skywalker Saga and Rogue One Solo stuff with maybe the Zavi Steelbook set from 2020, which would have all 11 films together if I can treat that as a set. And then I'd still keep the Special Letterbox Collector's Edition VHS set out of Sentimentality. That's 2 slots. I would probably then include probably Definitive Collection still, I guess. I'd probably include the Video 8s because they were so tough to get. So the Japanese Video 8s that, ironically, Jeremy Goss, who asked this question, helped me acquire. So that kind of makes sense, kind of symmetry there. And then for the last item, again, if we're talking sets, then I would make sure to include one set, I guess probably from the UK, doesn't really matter, but one set of the 3D releases, or releases that include the 3D discs for all of the Disney-era films that have 3D releases. That would give me 5 total items, when some of them are considered sets in this case. But part of me has to sit back and think about that. Because let's say I didn't include the Definitive Collection, I included something else. Not including the Definitive Collection would allow me to get rid of my Laserdisc players, which are only there if I sell off the rest of the collection. Only there for the Definitive Collection. Is it really worth the space to keep them? Same type of thing to some degree for VHS, but I think that even if I got rid of my VHS player, I'd still want to keep that special letterbox collector's edition from '92 out of sentimental value. So I don't think, even if I sold off the VHS player, I don't think that would eliminate hanging on to it. I also have more VHS that I would probably want to have around, maybe, to keep the VHS player. Like, I was in a play when I was in like a freshman in high school, and I've got a VHS cassette of the play. I've got all of Time Cop taped from television, the TV series, plus a cassette where the creator of the series, Mark Verheiden, actually sent me the 2 episodes that I missed in recording. That would probably stay. But all those are things that I've already digitized. So if I'm okay with keeping digitized but not the actual cassettes to watch on a player, which is kind of the point of having digitized them, maybe I could sell off the VHS player. And the same thing with the 3D stuff. If I didn't have the 3D stuff anymore, I'd probably still keep my 3D ability to play because of, Marvel 3D stuff and other 3D stuff. But if we're talking about the whole collection, including non-Star Wars stuff that might leave me with no 3D discs at all, I really wouldn't have a need for the PlayStation 3D monitor in here. I could get a bigger television in here. I wouldn't necessarily need my old PS3 in here anymore. I could get rid of that completely. Same thing to some degree with the PS4 Pros that we have sitting around here with disc drives that are like the actual optical disc drives that are kind of wonky. They've been replaced on both of them by now. I wouldn't necessarily need those, to be able to play them. Although, I still want them for the PSVR stuff for the older games, even though most of those can be played on PS5. There's a lot of questions that come up to me when it comes to getting rid of a collection like this one. Because if we're talking about why would I sell them off? Probably for clearing space. But wouldn't that also mean I would want to clear space with the players that aren't needed anymore as well? And how to more efficiently do that. So a little bit tricky when you come to kind of the big picture. But I think those 2 lists of 5, I think those are probably where I would land, depending on whether you allow me to count sets as items or if they need to be individual items. But definitely an interesting question. Not necessarily one I've really considered all that much before, but, right now, I don't intend on selling at any given point, but there's always, the need for extra space. I almost feel like I'm more likely to sell off other stuff that's not Star Wars to clear extra space rather than selling off Star Wars stuff to clear extra space, at least from the current collection. We'll see. And with that, that was all of the questions asked by members of the Star Wars Home Video community over there on Facebook, Star Wars Home Video group. Again, you can find that group at the link directly below here. If you want to join that group run by Justin Berger, I also moderate over there, and that's where I happen to collect the questions for this time. If you have questions for the next of these Q&A videos, let's try to actually do it through YouTube. Put your questions for a subsequent Q&A episode into the comments of this video. I will not answer them in the comments to this video. I will hold them for the next Q&A video, if there's enough of them to do it. Otherwise, I'll just turn to the Facebook group again. But hopefully there'll be enough here on YouTube. But with that, thank you all for watching. I hope you found this entertaining and interesting. Maybe? But with that, we will wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the home video viewers.